Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. This is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to you about what you believe and why, and our guests, too. We talk to pretty much anybody that wants to talk to us about this stuff. I am your host, ObjectivelyDan, and every single week, I always have a special guest joining me. This week is no different. Hey, this guy's been around these parts before. It's MD Aware. Everybody, MD Aware, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be back. It's my favorite show.
Favorite show. Did you hear that, guys? Favorite show. We got another one. So add that to the list. Very good. Well, how have you been, MD Aware?
I can't complain. You all know that I work in cancer research, among other things. And my lab exploded, not literally, but a whole bunch of pipes burst and flooded the whole lab and put off all the experiments. So it's been a crazy week moving house.
Yeah, you were telling us a little bit about that before the show, and that is really unfortunate. I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope things get better for you. But as you've mentioned before, you actually know some stuff. According to Canada, according to the licensures there,
yes,
right?
Yeah. According to some university trustees or whatever.
According to some people, you know some stuff. So that's good, because we have a lot of people that like to talk, but don't always know stuff on this show. And you know stuff, MD Aware. So I'm really glad that you do. So folks, if you want to call in, because we do have open lines, ask MD Aware some stuff. Not your personal medical stuff. I don't want to know about that. Like if you got a toe infection or something, you got to talk to your doctor about that. MD Aware is not giving away, free advice here. But I was thinking we might talk about some coronavirus stuff in a second, like what's been going on with that, what people have been saying. But also I want to talk about something that just happened in Canada quite recently, which is very awesome, which is that gay conversion therapy has officially been banned across the entire country. So congratulations to you guys.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So Bill C4.
This was this is my argument for moving the entire ACA to Canada. We just have to find a location where the ACA anagram still works.
Right.
So
there's got to be
Community of Alberta, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking Alberta, right?
And Alberta is the Texas of Canada. So I think it'll be great.
There's got to be an Austin, Canada somewhere, right?
Ooh, that's good. That's a good question.
I'm sure.
I mean, what would be great is if you moved it to somewhere with a really crazy name like Medicine Hat or Moose Jaw or something like that. How distinctive would that be, right?
The Medicine Hat community. Well, it'd be the Atheist Community of Medicine Hat, which is interesting. Different acronym. But if it would be Austin, it'd be funny if it was a population of 2,000 people and we just move in there and just take over the whole operation. That'd be really funny. But let's talk a little bit more about this gay conversion therapy stuff. We've talked a little bit about this on the show before, because when I was a Christian, I just assumed that this was just a thing you could do. I thought that was a real legitimate place where people studied and knew what they were talking about. You could go to a place and actually get healed of your, I don't know what you call it, your lusts, I guess, your desires. I used to work under this framework that being gay was a choice, and that even though that doesn't really make any sense, but I thought that it was something that you could break. It was something like this sounds so bad to say, but something like alcoholism, where it's which is obviously bad things about alcoholism that people don't say anymore. But it's it's just a mental thing that you can kind of just break and if you go through enough therapy and if you get enough treatment, like that's something you could do. So that's not what gay conversion therapy is. In fact, it's not really a therapy at all, is it?
No, I mean, it's certainly not a therapy. And,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, like terms like that are not regulated, right?
Right.
So there's not a lot of rules about who can go around calling what. But at least, in Canada, I'd be interested to know how they're going to enforce it, because what will be the difference between these evangelical Christian shops who used to do conversion therapy? What if they just change the name and they say, "Yeah, no, it's a young men's retreat or something like that," and what they're really doing is the equivalent of conversion therapy? Like, I wonder how the Christian communities are going to respond to this sort of thing.
Yeah, I wonder if you could just have like just a regular camp, but then like they just do some of the stuff that they would do
Yeah.
at one of these other kinds of places, right? Like I could definitely see that happening. But I don't know. Are there a lot of evangelical camps in Canada? Like I imagine there's not as many as like in the United States, but
Well, I don't know.
yeah.
I grew up Catholic. So we weren't so much, or I wasn't really exposed to the really evangelical stuff. I've heard of these conversion therapy camps, and there are some, and they go into like, the big forested areas like Algonquin Park and things like that. And I don't know, it's just really unsettling. And I ran into a lot of these folks in my undergrad because there were these, campus church groups and things like that. And so they would have maybe not conversion therapy retreats, but they would go to these camps, and they'd be like focused worship camps. And they come back and tell these stories that are very like cult reminiscent, and like
Like
people.
what do they mean by that?
Well, so they would come back and they talk about like, oh, he's like, oh, what'd you do at your camp? And they say stuff like, oh yeah, we like spent 3 hours just playing music and thinking about God and chanting. I'm like, that's really weird. And they're like, no, it was amazing. I was filled with the Holy Spirit. And like, I don't know. I just it's a lot of that groupthink and a lot of strange behavior, and I could never really understand the pull of it. But I mean, I guess it appealed to them, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
It's
I don't know what they would do for like a conversion therapy thing. I guess a lot of praying.
it reminds me of like a lot of these rehabilitation clinics because I think people feel the same way about these. I don't know how many people realize that most rehab places are BS. Like I would say more than half. I don't know the exact numbers, but a lot of them are like just profit institutions. They're definitely there to make money. Like they, Dr. Phil's gotten accused of this for promoting a lot of these organizations and stuff. But a lot of it has the same problems where they're not based on any real rigorous methodology. There's no like real research that shows like, yes, this is how you can change someone's sexuality by doing this electroshock therapy or doing these kinds of group therapy sessions. And even though they try to employ these things at these camps, but it's all based on BS. I mean, they always try to get funding for these things, but it never works. And of course, there's been a lot of people who have spoken out about these camps. I think it was the president from the ex-president of like Exodus International, who's now said that he was ex-gay, now isn't. It might be a different organization. And then there was we've had people call into the show, at least one person who's told us about their experiences with some of that stuff. So it's definitely like I think it's straight up abuse what they're doing at these institutions. I mean, I think that's fair to say, and I'm really glad that Canada's made that step forward. I really wonder how long it would take for the United States to see a similar kind of legislation, because I could see it not happening for a while, at least on a national level. I know there's some states that have been talking about it, but probably not in Texas anytime soon.
But it seems less controversial than like abortion laws to me.
What do you mean by less controversial? You think like most people are against it, or do you think most
I would
people aren't?
think. Well, I would think that it would be less. I don't know. I think it'd be less objectionable to the general population to ban conversion.
To ban
camps. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my impression, but I'm not an American.
I think, it's funny because I've been seeing people's takes on this, and there's a lot of bad takes. There was at least one pastor guy that was, we talked about this before the show, but he was like, there's this whole video of him complaining about this is taking away our religious expressions. This is against our ability to express ourselves religiously and profess our beliefs. And I have a feeling like people would do the exact same thing here. But, we did pass gay marriage as a thing a couple years ago, and that happened. So maybe it could happen. I don't know, but
that's an interesting take, because it goes back to what I think comes up a lot on these shows is where, like, how far do your religious rights get you? How much pain can you inflict in expressing your religious freedom or living out your religious freedoms. And I think that's the thing that comes up a lot on the show.
It's true. But I think a big problem with that argument, of course, is one, obviously we don't agree with the premise that, any of what they're saying is true. But even beyond that, what happens with these kinds of stuff is they're sending kids. I mean, they're sending people under the age of 18 to this stuff who really can't consent to any of this stuff, and who oftentimes are actively protesting against it, but it's their families that are really making them do it. And that's one of the saddest parts of all, because you're not getting that support from your loved ones around you for just being who you are, but also you're going through what's probably a very traumatizing event that isn't going to help you in any real way. I mean, really, there's, for every one or two people that say, oh yes, I've gone to these things and it's been helpful, there's 10 people that'll say, no, this is an awful experience and it shouldn't be a thing. So yeah, it does. In my mind, of course, and we would both agree, it crosses that line of abuse. I think that's how you have to lay it out, right? Like, how do you have to lay out a secular case that this is just a human rights violation more than anything. I think that's how you would convince people.
So here's a question for you then. What if whatever method that they used was successful, hypothetically?
So
okay, fine, go ahead.
You finish this. No.
Okay, all right. So let's say it works.
Okay.
And say they stop doing this to children because they can't consent. Instead, they're taking, Christian young men or whatever, 20-somethings, who have obviously internalized this shame about their sexuality. And they want to go through the conversion process. It's still abusive in nature, but it's also effective. What would you say to something like that?
Well, I guess if it's abusive in nature, I still wouldn't let it happen, right? Hypothetically, if there was a treatment process you could go through where you could change your sexuality and the results for it were pretty unanimous on it, I could see how somebody might want to do that. But I don't know, because what now? You can't. But
well, again, I would want to read, and I wish that I had. I'd want to read exactly what this new law says, right? Like, what do they mean by conversion therapy? What's their definition? What are the procedures that are included and excluded from this conversion therapy?
Yeah, I don't know. That's really strange. But hey, I gotta plug something real quick here. I gotta let everybody know a few things, because today we are doing something special, MJ, where we are going to make a very special announcement for Truth Wanted. And I'm very excited to announce that. But before we can do that, we have got to get more people to call into the show so that we can tell you guys. So we have open lines right now, and we are still waiting on you guys to call in and come talk to us about what's on your mind. If I was in church, I'd say, what's on your heart? Come talk to us about that and see what you think. But yeah, I would want to know the specific wording of that too, because I think people would try to get around that. Oh, I got to show this off, by the way. I know people are probably already saying this in the chat, but look at this thing I got in December here. You probably already see it. I got the Nickelodeon hoodie with the sleeves and the cartoons on here. Check this out. Watch this move right here. Bam. Wait, hold on. wrong leg. It matching sweatpants with these, by the way. This was
now the question is it comfortable?
super comfy. This was like $15 at Walmart. All right. Best $15 at Walmart I think I've ever spent. Really good stuff. So anyway, got to show off the Nickelodeon fit I got going on today. But while we still have some open lines, MDware, let's talk about some coronavirus stuff.
Sure. Okay.
I don't want to talk about coronavirus stuff.
No.
But I kind of feel like I have to. You know what I mean? It's gotten bad in Texas. It was like 70
bad everywhere.
It was 72,000 cases yesterday, I believe was the number, which is like the highest it's been as a daily, like this entire time. Like we started this 2 years ago.
Yeah, I know. That's the crazy thing, right? Is it feels like we've already been through this, you know, and it's still not over. It's killing us. And like in the healthcare world, you know, I obviously work with a lot of, you know, I work in the hospital and all that stuff.
Right.
We're just like getting crushed. And I mean, it's a little bit different from the States because here we have universal healthcare. So nobody has to go bankrupt to pay for their necessary cancer surgery or whatever. But, you know, now we can't bring patients in to take out their cancers because if they need an ICU bed, there are none to be had.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. If something goes wrong and they need a higher level of care, can't do that. And you can't do any major operations, right? Because there's not enough people to care for them. And so it's like we're having a really hard time dealing with it, but also the patients are having a really hard time dealing with it because now there's people who maybe, you know, they have like a colon cancer or something. Right. Would have been fine, but COVID. And so they never had their surgery and their cancer progressed and now they have like incurable disease, right?
Yeah.
It's horrible.
So in your work environment, are you seeing people talk in ways about the virus that go to like a conspiracy level? Are you seeing that with your coworkers or with patients and stuff? Are people actively mentioning that to you?
So there are patients, they usually will not disclose that that level to us, right? They'll just say like no, or I'll think about it or whatever.
Yeah.
And like frankly, someone in my position, you know, I have a very specific job, right? I'm there to like do an operation or whatever, treat a specific thing. But if I were their family doctor, that would be something I'd have to unpack, right? There's almost no controversy or conspiracy or whatever among physicians.
Yeah.
I know there is a population of nurses where it's significant. And there's a lot of animosity between the majority of the nursing profession who are behind vaccination and the minority who are against it. And that tension is just making things worse.
So this is so crazy because I feel like we talked about this a few weeks ago. But I've noticed this trend too, where if you look at a lot of these websites that are trying to interview quote unquote professionals, because they're trying to get that quote about how, the vaccine is a scam and all this stuff. They tend to be nurses. That seems to be the medical qualification that I'm seeing there. And I why is that? What is there something about that level of education that's just, is there a hierarchy?
I could speculate, but I think maybe the biggest thing is that there's different levels of nurses. Yeah. There's like a registered nurse. There's an RPN, which is like a registered practical nurse. I think there's different designations and they imply different levels of education. But what you might call the lowest level of education is a very like practical education, right? So there's not a lot of class stuff. There's not a lot of fundamental science. And it's mostly on the job learning, which makes you great at doing the things that you're trained to do, right? It's how you train to be a surgeon. You don't sit in a classroom. You do some of that and you study, but a lot of the learning is done hands-on. And so I think that it's those type of nurses, those nurses with that level of training who are most into the conspiracy stuff because they come from an educational background where they're not looking at evidence, they're not looking at science, they're just looking at what the person who taught them would do. And so I think they're getting a lot of their information, their epistemology is very, well, they said this and this person said this. And so it's a lot more anecdotal in nature than the scientific training that is sort of standard in medical school, and that training pathway, and the registered nurses, and I guess you'd say like university trained nursing cohort.
That's so interesting. I have a lot of family that work in healthcare, and I told this story on the Discord. I don't think I told this live on air, but I had a family member who a nurse on their team actually sent a letter in and quit because they didn't want to get the vaccine, because they were required to get the vaccine, and said that they weren't going to do it for religious reasons, and then ended up getting hospitalized, that person and their husband both at that same facility, which is just surreal to hear about. And this is just, obviously I'm hearing this from one family member. I can't imagine what's happening across the country. I'm sure there's there's probably one or two people at all these workplaces who are probably thinking like similar things, right? Or at least are somewhat doubtful or have,
So at my institution, there was a huge cohort, a relatively like small percentage, but a large number of nurses who were not compliant with the vaccine policy of the institution, and they had their employment terminated. They had like months or whatever to get the vaccine, and they refused. Finally, they had their employment terminated, and they went and they opened up a non-vaccinated clinic of their own. So they would try their whole marketing scheme was to say, we're unvaccinated, and we're not going to discriminate against our patients for being unvaccinated. Which implies, of course, that the hospitals are discriminating against patients who are not vaccinated, which is not true, right? Like if you come into the hospital with like, a medical problem, then we're going to treat you regardless. So it's not like we're discriminating, but they're weaponizing that whole movement.
Oh my gosh. This is so wild. So wild.
Very frustrating from this side of things. But
yeah, I mean, who would have thought, like, the anti-vax movement used to be such a small minority, or at least not a very vocal one. And now it has grown so much. It is bigger than it has ever been, at least in recent history. I know historically vaccines haven't always been accepted by the general public, but like this is just so weird to see as a movement, like a real political movement that is happening, and just very frustrating. And I don't know, everybody's asking, I feel like I read this New York Times columnist post today saying like America is falling apart, I think was the title, and the conclusion of this column was like, I don't know what's happening, and I don't know how to fix this. Like, that's literally how the article ended. It's just like, I don't read columns from you, New York Times, for you to like tell me that you don't know things. Like, I want to know
just
some
throwing
answers.
up their hands.
You just literally just throwing up your hands. It's like, I feel like that's such a common feeling right now with everybody. Nobody really knows what to do with this situation, and it's just it feels very hopeless. But maybe we can generate a sense of hope today. Or maybe some of you guys disagree with us and you want to talk to us about why you do. We would love to talk to you about that, because again, this is Truth Wanted, folks. We want to talk to you about what you believe and why. And I think we should get to some calls now. What do you think, MD?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. But before we do, we have to thank our patron of the week. Every single week, we thank one of our patrons from patreon.com/truthwanted, or Patreon, tiny.cc/Patreon TW. And you guys rock. You help make this show happen every single week. So props to everybody that donates. But we always like to give a special shout out once a week. And this week's patron of the week is Seek Atheist. Thank you so much, Seek Atheist, for donating on patreon.com. You guys rock. Again, thank you guys so much for doing that. You are the best. Okay, so let's get to some calls. We have a couple of calls now, which I'm really happy to talk to people about. I want to talk to Liam. Liam from Louisiana. Liam from Louisiana, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi, guys. Big fan of the show. First time calling in. A little bit nervous. I didn't have a medical question, but I had a question for MD Aware. He said it was you said you grew up being raised Catholic?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I'm living in New Orleans, and I'm an ex-evangelical myself, and so I haven't really ever been that involved in Catholicism. I've just become aware of the Catholic practice of red mass. Are you familiar with that?
It rings a bell, but I don't remember the details. Can you remind me?
Well, sure. I'm just trying to get some more information myself and just kind of make sure that I didn't wake up in some alternate timeline. It just sounds so nefarious. From what I understand, you can have a mass in celebration of anything or an appreciation of anything. And this is one specifically where I'm reading off okay. So this is an appreciation of judges, lawyers, and government officials.
Interesting.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at this too.
Right.
Yeah, so I've never heard of this, which is really interesting. So yeah, members of the legal profession, regardless of religious affiliation, judges, lawyers, law school professors, law students, and government officials, marking the opening of the judicial year. Okay, so basically asking to seek justice.
Yeah, right off the bat, that sounds like a backdoor, networking.
That sounds so sketchy. Yeah, that's like the breakfast. What's it called? The prayer breakfast. The prayer breakfast that they do every year, which is just one big networking event for politicians and people who work in religious. Like that just sounds like a networking event for the Catholic Church, doesn't it? That's really interesting.
Totally. I mean, you guys are lucky in the States. We're very progressive in Canada on a lot of these social issues, but we still don't have a separation between religion and government that's enshrined in law.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think we keep forgetting about that. I heard a British person speaking about that said, that's one thing you Americans have got right. You don't have, a requirement that a certain number of your congressmen are, officials from the church.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's so interesting, though, because even though that is the case, I feel like Canadian and a lot of European politics ends up being more secular anyway. Like American politicians definitely use religion to their advantage, which is such an interesting phenomenon. But
yeah, it is. It's very odd. And Scandinavian countries are similar.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that's got me, though, that I'm kind of taking this personally. Sorry if I kind of turned into a small rant, but in New Orleans, I mean, we shut down the city basically for a Catholic holiday. For Mardi Gras the day before Ash Wednesday. So we're all kind of used to it right now. And Catholicism is undoubtedly intertwined with the politics, but it's kind of this back room. You can't really prove it. But I've been reaching out to some people because, right on the official page for the mayor on Facebook, she sent out an invitation. I just pulled it back up. The city of New Orleans and the inaugural committee invite you to join the inaugural events for the incoming mayor. The first event listed on this invitation is an inaugural mass. So right next to the inauguration ceremony. So it's above the board.
Yeah, I believe that for New Orleans, though. I mean, Liam, you may not know this about me. Was born in New Orleans. That's originally where most of my family is from. I talk about that I'm from the Waco area, and that's true. I grew up there, but my family is from the New Orleans area. I go there almost once a year. I go see it every time. It's an interesting city because you could have giant Catholic churches on one corner, and literally right across the street, a psychic will read you your palms and stuff. It's just a really weird city to be in. But Louisiana itself has the craziest political history of any other state. I will fight you on this. Okay. You got to look up Huey P. Long and look up all these politicians. Every year, they do these indexes on corruption in governments and stuff. And they do this for countries and they do this for states. Louisiana has proven to be the most corrupt state in the United States when it comes to stuff. I mean, you check on the news and there's always people being arrested for money going somewhere or something. So I don't know. We can only speculate. Speculate, but I would not be surprised if there are people there who maybe are getting some lawyers for some certain cases that need to happen, or things like that, or really want to make those benefits happen. I have no idea,
right.
but it's definitely possible.
Because
definitely possible.
It just blows me away that it's just right there in black and white on the whole internet that, using, city resources and in the name of the city of New Orleans, inviting you to a religious event. And I mean, I reached out to just in the past couple of days to, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, because if you think about it, if they're using city resources in the name of the city, I fund the city. I pay taxes here. And so they're compelling my participation in the promotion of a religious event.
Yeah.
That is a clear violation of the 14th Amendment.
That is definitely true. It's just
right out there in the open.
Yeah, and Louisiana too, like I think people outside the United States, you understand too, it's a different, because when people think of the southern United States, they usually think of this kind of Protestant, sort of Baptist culture. Louisiana is very different from the rest of the U.S. and the rest of the South. It's a very Catholic area, so Catholic, in fact, it's the only state in the U.S. that isn't separated by counties, but by parishes. And it's because of the religious history of the state, right? And you've got so many churches there. Most of the population there is Catholic. It's just a historical fact. But you've also, again, you've got these weird intersections where, like, you go down like the French Quarter and you'll just see like voodoo shops, again, just right next to Catholic artwork. It's all kind of intermixed together. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but like,
it's almost like it's a cultural thing rather than a truly religious thing, right?
I think it is for a lot of people, but there are a lot of people who take it very seriously too. I mean, you got that mix of both, but it's just a weird city. I will go ahead, Liam.
I didn't know that you had grown up around here. That's fantastic. I'm an import myself, but I've dug in. I've ridden out 2 hurricanes, and so I know until I die now. But I will agree that there is a special capacity for cognitive dissonance here, because New Orleans Catholics believe that when you die, you either go to heaven or hell. But they believe in ghosts. They believe ghosts.
Yeah, no, they got ghost tours all over the freaking city, right? And like, there's a lot of cemeteries in New Orleans too, because like they just had. I don't know. There's a big tradition of Catholics having a lot of these tombstones and stuff. Not tombstones, like what do you call it? Where
mausoleums,
sepulchers, right? Sepulchers.
Sepulchers,
mausoleums. Okay. Those outside graves. You see those all over the place. Once a year,
right.
The All Saints Day, they go out and they clean those mausoleums and stuff. It's definitely a big part of the culture. But yeah, I agree. It's another thing of cognitive dissonance, right? Where you can have these very huge outward displays of faith, but then if you really look at like the day-to-day lives of some of these people, it's kind of just whatever. So I don't know. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. But Liam,
I'll let you move on to other things. But I did want to push back on one thing. All what you said is true, but the more I look into it, it isn't just a New Orleans fluke, because they have these all over the country. And I've been reading recently about there's one in Washington D.C., a red mass. Like coincidentally, when it is the day before the Supreme Court goes into session.
No way. Is it really? Oh,
yeah.
No.
And I'm sitting here looking at this going, did someone hack Wikipedia and post all that? Am I being trolled right now? I'm just wondering what world I woke up in. But no, I'm finding other sources for it where some people have, Americans United has gone to the mass before.
Wow.
And, it's a real thing.
That's just priming.
It's something that I think we really need to stop and look at. Yes.
Yeah.
That is really interesting, Liam. I didn't know about the red masses. That's a new term for me. Thank you for introducing me to that. And good luck with your stays in the city. Cool thing about New Orleans is that they have been actually mandating that you show your vaccine card when you go into places and stuff, which I think is a good idea to do. I wish other places were doing that.
You don't all do that?
But no, not in Texas. No, absolutely not. No, people aren't even enforcing the mask stuff anymore around
we're
here.
Like here in Toronto, we're like locked down basically. Like movie theaters are closed, indoor dining's closed, bars are closed, everything's closed.
Yeah, it's not the same. Not the same. And it's probably why we're seeing these surges in cases. So. But what do I know? I just host a show. But anyway, we have some other great calls coming in. I want to try to get to everybody. Wow, a lot of awesome calls. Let's talk to Mario. Mario's calling in from New Jersey. Mario, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Yeah, hello. Hey, are you guys atheists?
Yes.
I'm comfortable with that term mostly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, this is for you guys and all the other atheists listening. I want you to just type this in on YouTube, okay? Matt Dillahunty.
Well, good thing I have the power to mute you, and we can just go ahead and drop the call, because don't know what you're about to say, but I'm not actually interested. It didn't sound like you want to start a conversation there. Well, that's
when you
fun.
start with Matt Dillahunty,
Yeah,
and Matt Dillahunty's not on the show.
he's not here. Nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
But that's really cool. Thanks for calling, I guess. Let's see. We do have some other people who want to talk to us. Oh man, lots of people. Let's talk to Trey. Trey calling in from Florida. Trey, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, Dan. Hey, MDWare. How are you guys doing?
Doing
Good, how are you?
fantastic.
Good. Well, that last call was kind of funny.
Yeah.
So I am a cis-gay atheist living in one of the COVID capitals of the USA. And I have maybe a quick comment and then my actual main question on the Bill C4. Very, very happy to hear about that. I wish something like that could happen in America, but not in the current political climate, I would presume.
Yeah.
But so just on the gay conversion camps bit at the beginning, another like real bad aspect of that I've kind of found out about is how one of the treatment modalities, quote unquote modalities, that they use is like putting the gay person like in a literal sack and soaking them like underwater to simulate rebirth from the womb.
Oh yes, I've heard about this.
Unfortunately.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Isn't that
Sounds like
awful?
waterboarding.
Teenagers have died. Yeah, it's
God.
pretty intense. So that bill is definitely needed. So my main question is maybe a finicky one, but I feel like it's one that I just haven't heard talked about, and I'm curious. For MD Aware, what is the most convincing evidence, or even like collection of evidences, if that's a thing, that you can think of that provide empirical support for masks and like mask wearing? Obviously for me, it's common sense. Like I just, I'm like, doctors do it, let's wear a mask. But I have coworkers that are like unvaccinated by choice. And they're very like anti-mask, but wear it because it's like rules. And when they talk to me about it, they get combative and defensive, and and I'm kind of like, I can't just say duh.
Yeah.
Common sense.
Yeah. Okay. So the ways that disease can spread. Okay. 3 major categories, as far as I'm concerned. There's contact, where if I have the disease and I want to give it to Dan, I have to get the disease on my hand. I cough into my hand and then I shake Dan's hand. That's a contact transmission, right? Second is droplet, right? Which you've heard of these now, right? You cough or something and the droplets containing the pathogen get put into the air, where they hang out for a period of time and they slowly will drop to the to the ground unless they're inhaled by someone or they come into contact with the mucous membrane, like someone's eye or something like that, right? And the third is airborne, right? And historically, we've thought that very few pathogens were airborne, because usually they have to be very small, so small that they're a fraction of the size of the droplet, and they have to be able to be suspended in the air for long periods of time, almost like sort of indefinitely, right? They can sort of just ride on the air currents for a while, but it really has to do with the size. And so when it comes to COVID, as far as I'm concerned, I think that it's clear at this point that it is, at least to a certain degree, airborne in terms of spread. This is why in the hospitals, we're all supposed to wear N95 masks, which are the ones that will protect you or prevent the spread of an airborne disease, right? The standard surgical masks and the cloth masks that people wear, they are more effective against droplet. Now, I don't think that any disease, I don't think that COVID is just airborne or just droplet. I think it, it could be contact, it could be droplet, and I think it could be airborne, right? So I wouldn't say that that wearing a mask, like a cloth mask or a surgical mask, a standard surgical mask, is going to protect you or prevent the spread of all of the COVID coming out of an infected person, right? But it's going to cut it down.
Right.
And I think when we're dealing with this sort of thing, what we're going to be working on is we're not going to get a magic bullet that stops everything, right? Except for like isolating. If you literally keep people in their home and don't let them leave, that's like the only way to stop the spread. If you literally have no contact, even then, you hear some crazy stories. I read an article about how there were two people in a quarantine hotel, two families in a quarantine hotel. They never actually met or were in the same room, but the disease managed to spread across the hallway under the like closed doors of these two rooms, and one person infected the other, the other person in the other room. So to answer your question in a very long-winded fashion, I think that the evidence supporting mask use is going to be mixed, because masks are only going to be effective against a portion of the spread. When it comes to making the decision whether or not to wear the mask, I think it comes down to a risk-benefit analysis that everyone does, right? The risk is essentially zero, right? The masks do nothing for you. I've been as a surgeon, been in operations that last like 24 hours or more, where I'm wearing a mask the whole time and no ill effects. Although maybe some people who watch this show might disagree. Maybe they think I've had some sort of brain damage or something. But no ill effects, right? You can basically wear a surgical mask indefinitely. And the benefit is if you cut the transmission by 10%, even 5%, like you're still doing that it still works out to be a positive effect wearing the mask, right? I think that if we did a trial where we got everyone to wear N95 masks, which are very uncomfortable and difficult to wear long term. I mean, again, there's no ill effects per se, but you've seen the nurses posting with the bruising around their bridge of their nose and things like that. Like, they're serious masks, and they have to be fitted. When I go for an N95 fitting, I have to like put on a big hood, and they spray foul smelling stuff into the air around my head and make sure that I can't smell or taste it. That's how they confirm that the N95 is actually fitting me properly. So if they did a clinical trial where people were all wearing well-fitted N95 masks, I think the difference would be very clear. The problem is that as a solution is not feasible, right? We can't do N95 mask fitting on an entire population. In the States, your population's like 300 plus million, right? Like, it's just impossible to implement. So people are doing the next best thing. And this is why you see people recommending you wear 2 masks or face shields, all these things. They're all ways to try to limit the spread, and none of them are going to be perfect. And I think that's what a lot of people who are anti-maskers think, is that, well, if I see one person who gets infected, even though everyone was wearing a mask, that means masks don't work. It's like, well, it's not a zero-sum game, right?
Yeah. Or they'll argue, well, it can be spread by contact, it can be spread by these other things, so it seems pointless to wear a mask, which isn't true. Like you said, it's to reduce that risk, right? It's not going to be absolute, It's never, and it's never been promised to be that. But there's a reason why doctors and people who work in hospitals wear this stuff every single day. It's because it's always been shown to be effective. And the United States just doesn't have a culture of wearing masks. If you look at places like Japan, people, it is not uncommon, and most people know this, but it's not uncommon for workers in Japan to go into work with a mask if they're not feeling their best. And that's been, and personally, a couple of years ago, I would have said, yeah, I wish we did that in the US more. Now, unfortunately, as we've done that more in the US, now it's almost like wearing a mask is a political symbol. It's like, I believe in this virus, and I believe that I'm helping people, and people see that as a bad thing. People see that as virtue signaling. People see that as being politically correct, which it should never have been any of these things, but it's just reduction of potential harm. And I don't know, we just have a problem with doing that in this country, and it's very sad.
I mean, I think people in general have a problem with understanding things that are not 100%, right?
Yeah.
They want they want one thing that fixes everything. And in the real world, I don't think anything's like that. Certainly not in medicine. There's like very few things where there's one answer and it works 100% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Trey, I think MD Ware gave a great answer. I hope that was a good answer for you.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Yeah,
perfect.
That was a great question, Trey.
Yeah, well, I hope that's helpful in
you.
I hope it's helpful in your endeavors, and I hope you can convince other people to wear masks, because we're still not done with this thing, unfortunately. Like, I'm vaccinated, I've got booster shot and everything, and I still, feel compelled to wear a mask most places that I go. In fact, wherever I have it, I will try to wear it, if not for the fact that, one, I think it's a polite thing to do, but also it's just like, I want to let people know that I don't know. I guess it is a signaling thing on one part, because it is kind of political. And it's like, I do want to let other people know that I'm not trying to be selfish.
Well, I mean, here certainly, where basically everyone wears a mask.
Yeah.
Like regardless of your vaccination status, everywhere indoors requires you to wear a mask.
Yeah.
And people who don't, it's almost like it's a signal to everyone else around them that, like, you want to stay away from this person. They're maybe a little bit antisocial. There's something going on that's wrong. Like, they're not buying into the societal contract.
Yeah. And if there's one thing about Americans in particular, it's that whenever there's a rule, people don't want to follow it. Everybody wants to be, the special exception. Everybody wants to be the guy that says, no, forget that. We're all
culture
free.
Of rebellion.
Yeah, it is. It is a culture of rebellion, which has its benefits, but oh man, does it have its bad parts. I mean,
see, you guys got your independence by rebelling, and we got it by asking nicely. So I think that says a lot about our respective cultures.
Yeah, there's some things that could be said about that, but we don't have time to get into that right now. We have to show you some of the other shows that are produced by the Atheist Community of Austin. Check this out.
And of course, we are joined by Mandisa Thomas.
Hello, I think this is my first time on Secular Sexuality. Maybe
we get to be
second?
your first?
I don't know. I think I'm rational. Probably not. But like, some people say that I am. And it's like, I still have this weird thing that freaks me out. And I don't know. Everybody's got those.
No, I was just going to say, honestly, I'm not surprised. I know some people out there may be hearing this and think, wow, I really would have thought Satan would have done better.
We're riding off into the sunset, and I want the chat to tell us which one of us is Butch Cassidy and which one of us is the Sundance Kid.
Who's Thelma and who's Louise?
And joining me today is Dave Carpe, the bleeping DM.
Do we actually bleep on this show? I thought we said everything.
Damn, I forgot how comfy I looked in that bathrobe with the couch setting behind me. It's a good bathrobe, y'all.
Do you feel comfy with this backdrop?
Dude, the Nick fit. No, so this background right here, this is a joke, okay? All right, I see. The crew thinks they're funny. The crew thinks they're funny by putting this up here. But, I'm doing this for you, MD Aware, if only because the context fits. But yeah.
Oh, yeah.
wasn't my first choice. I will say that, but I do it for the laughs. So we still have some other people that want to talk to us. Great topics of conversation. Please, if you're on the line, stay on the line. And if you still want to call, we might be able to have some time to get to you before the end of the show. So I want to talk next to Stephanie. Stephanie is calling in from Maine. Stephanie, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Oh, hi. How are you? You led off the show with a discussion of conversion therapy, and I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. I understand one of y'all is up in Canada. I just wanted to remind you that up until the recent ban on conversion therapy, Toronto was kind of a hotbed of conversion therapy. There's a fellow by the name of Ken Zucker at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto, who basically had, the practice was the accepted practice for years and years and years in some corners of the mental health field. Was indeed to view being queer as a mental illness of sorts.
Sure.
It was in the DSM in the early versions, I think.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, DSM-3, DSM-4. I'm a veteran of those days, and as a queer person, trans person myself, I kind of I experienced that.
Wow.
Your neighbors to the south here in Maine banned conversion therapy and adopted gender identity as a protected class in 2019, which I'm very proud of. I wish I could say the same for the rest of the states. But the other thing I wanted to, you sort of got into a little bit of what conversion therapy was, but in the case of there's this fellow, Dallin Oaks, who's a member of the Quorum of the 12 of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who denied that when he was president of Brigham Young University back in the 70s, that such a thing never occurred. But this fellow, a graduate student at BYU by the name of Max McBride, had this little deal where men were shown pictures of nude men and women, and if the subject, I'm quoting from an article, if the subject, quote, experienced sexual arousal from a photograph of a nude male, how do you suppose they measured that? Well, they put little sensors on certain portions. He would receive a shock in the bicep. A gradual increase of voltage upon repeated arousals was to serve as a negative feedback stimulus that would, according to the hypothesis, reorient him from homosexual to heterosexual, whereupon photographs of nude females were supposed to elicit sexual arousal. So this is how cruel conversion therapy is.
It's literally, it's Pavlovian
as a person
conditioning.
And it's so non-scientific.
Yeah.
I can't even believe it.
I don't know.
Medieval, and it's out and out torture, and the immense psychological damage that's done on top of the indoctrination, particularly in certain religious traditions, that being outside of the cishet norm is a sin against God, is one of the most appalling things that led me to abandon my faith at a very early age, because I could never believe that any compassionate God would play such a horrible trick on me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially since, you're supposed to have been beautifully and wonderfully made by God, right? And clearly they made you in a particular way that they then will punish you for. Like, that doesn't seem fair at all, right?
Yeah. And that there is a a revisionist movement that's kind of happening with some of the more liberal Christians out there that will are really trying to make this case that, oh, they were really talking about pederasty in a lot of these verses. They weren't talking about homosexuality, and they're trying, and I appreciate the effort. I appreciate that people are trying to change. I don't think it's the best way to change. Obviously, what I think the best way to change is to abolish it altogether. But let's hypothetically, let's say that Christians have been getting this all wrong, okay, for all this time. Look at the actual harm that's been done. Look at the millions of people's lives that have suffered because of this misinterpretation, right? So it doesn't even matter what the correct interpretation is. If this is how people have been doing it for literally thousands of years at this point, this treatment of this other class of person, that being someone who isn't a heterosexual or who isn't cis normative, then at what point can we even say, oh, well, we got to fix this, we got to change this, we got to go this out? I mean, that's just what it is, right? You have to just call it for what it is.
And I mean, to me, it would be, if I can't trust that interpretation that we thought we had, how do I know what the correct interpretation is, right?
Right.
Are you just guessing that, oh, no, this is what they actually meant?
So I'll appreciate any Christian that wants to try to make, efforts to change the church, but I do think it's futile. I don't, at the end of the day, I don't know. Anyway, Stephanie, you want to say?
I think it's important to recognize that it's only been recently when people have fully appreciated how cruel some of these things are or have been, to the point where they're being banned on a national scale or on a state scale. It's important to realize that, of course, people used to have, I mean, within my lifetime, people used to have the view that that these people need to be converted because it's unnatural. And it's in certain quarters, that's still the view, and it's unfortunate, and a lot of it does come out of religion, and a lot of it just comes out of human nature, because I think that religions spring from human nature, and people who are unaware of other ways of being human get scared.
Yeah. I can't think of another sin where you have to be tortured to be changed of it, right? Interesting how the sin of homosexuality just happens to be the one where you have to use some sort of physiological conditioning to really change. I wonder what that says about the people who view this thing. It's obviously disgusting. It's obviously not right. But I say it's obviously not right, but then again, like a couple of years ago, I don't know. I think a lot of people, I think what it is, Stephanie, is you're right. I think people are now recognizing the harm of this. I think people would be more sympathetic to this if they really realize the history that's really only been starting to be written in the past few decades, right? Because obviously people have been recording results and things, but that's not been widely publicized. That's not been a topic of national conversation up until very recent in our collective modern history. And I hope people, even folks who do go to church, who do see Christianity as their ideology, that maybe they'll say, well, maybe this part is at least wrong, and maybe we can at least get past that as a society, because ultimately we are going to have to live in a society with religious people, and they're going to be in part making laws and policy crafting, at least in our country. So like I'd rather take that. It's not ideal, right? I'd rather them like abandon it altogether, but like maybe as we keep pushing, as we keep having this conversation, hopefully more people can become sympathetic and realize why we're talking about this. It's not just a freedom to sin. It's not just a freedom to follow your desires. It's recognizing the human rights abuses that have been happening at these institutions. So anyway,
I'd like to leave you with this thought. people used to sign up for this kind of therapy.
Yeah.
Right.
And they still do.
Right.
They still do.
People used to sign up for this kind of therapy because they were so damaged by the indoctrination by the self-hatred that indoctrination induced in themselves, that they would sign up to.
Yeah, the conversion therapy was not the limit of the abuse.
Please make me normal, and they would sign up for it. And you know, it's a deeper, that torture is even deeper than the actual torture that they signed up for.
Yeah, that's true. It's a mental torture. Yeah, a psychological, self-imposed torture sometimes, because you've been taught that you're broken and that you need to be fixed, and what you're feeling isn't right and isn't normal, which, you know, is obviously.
I mean, I think that's the basis of Christianity, right? Is fundamentally that you're broken and you need to be fixed and saved.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Mine was definitely a guilt complex when it came to sin. I definitely wanted to follow up because I felt that sense of brokenness. What it really was this church doesn't like what I do, or this group of people. It's always been a social construct, but it's hard to see that when you don't have other people to talk to, or you live in a community that just doesn't accept you for who you are, and you can't feel safe in talking about that, which is why we have shows like this. Why there should be more advocacy and more people, you know, making these groups and spreading this awareness, because a lot of people think, oh, well, everybody, you know, hey, gay people are being represented in media, trans people being represented in media, everything's fine. It's we're not done yet. There's still so much more work to be done.
No, we're not done yet. We've come a long way. We have a fair bit to go, and I really appreciate your raising the subject and taking the time to talk. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you calling in, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences. You're absolutely brave. You're absolutely brave, just for fucking existing as a trans woman, but also living in a time period where you have to see that, and there's not shows on the internet that are helping you reinforce a positive state of mind, or telling you that, hey, you are who you are and that is okay. Like, you know, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that people have to do that, but we'll continue to try to make those changes, I guess. You know, can't give up. We have some other callers that we should talk to, and let's see. Good conversations. We're going to talk to Phil, who's calling in from Texas. Phil, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Good evening, gentlemen. Great show tonight. I have a quick story to tell you. Oh, yes. I have a quick story to tell you. I'm 63, and in the 70s, when I was a teenager, I was a member of a Disciples of Christ church. The Disciples of Christ is a very even-handed, vanilla, you know, kind of moderate Christian denomination. Our motto, it was and is, in essentials, unity; in non-essentials, liberty; in all things, love. Now, they didn't tell us what those essentials were. It was up to us to decide. But something happened to our church in the early 70s. A bunch of the youth group went to what was then called a lay witness mission, where we spent a weekend at another church and, you know, slept over, and there were healings and speaking in tongues and things like that. Well, we didn't do any of that in our church. So this kind of provided a thin entering wedge for, there was no such term as evangelical back then. It was charismatic. It was the charismatic movement. It was fundamentalist, and it was also the era of the Jesus people, you know, guys with beards and guitars singing Kumbaya, stuff like that. So I just watched Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and that's kind of what it was like. They planted, well, I shouldn't ascribe motive, but this charismatic movement infiltrated our church, our very moderate church, and kind of split it, kind of took it over. Now, the thing I wanted to say mostly is back then, there was nothing political about it. there was no mention of Christian nationalism. It was all church oriented and person oriented. So in the meantime, the fundagelicals have grown teeth and claws. But people, of course, I was a teenager, so I wanted to be the best possible Christian I could, and it was extremely confusing. It was very debilitating. I was enough of a science fan that I didn't quite buy in. I couldn't buy into a 6,000-year-old Earth or a global flood or anything like that. I think the moment that broke me was when I was in Sunday school, and a very, very nice man, I guess they decided they were going to give us the sex talk that day. And this very nice tall gentleman said, and I'll never forget this, he said, "The physical act of sex itself is extremely ugly."
Whoa! That definitely says more about like his life than he like meant to say, right? Yeah.
Even as a teenager, even as a 15-year-old, I thought, "Man, you're not doing it right."
Oh no! Oh man!
So I eventually extricated myself. Actually, I went to a big Assembly of God church with my friend because they had a lot of good-looking girls. But
man, I'm glad you're honest about that. I feel like there's a lot of people that do that. I definitely knew people that were like that. But
I found out years later they all went out in the parking lot and smoked dope afterwards. I wish I had known.
Oh, you could have joined in. Oh man.
Yeah. But I guess this point I want to make is it was different. It wasn't political back then, but it was insidious.
Well, you say that it's not political, and I believe it may be not for your church. But if you look at the history of the American evangelical movement in this country, really in the 60s and 70s, is when you're really starting to see the turn of these evangelical organizations switching political strategy and focusing on issues mainly things like abortion, but for some places interracial marriage, like some other strange things. But like there was definitely a shift in strategy. There's a great we really need to get the folks from the Straight White American Jesus podcast on, because they're like real scholars on the subject. But like they talk about this shift in movement in evangelical circles, because evangelical Christianity, out of all the forms of Christianity, has some of the most political influence in our country, in the United States, rather. And that's about that time period that you're talking about is when you're starting to see that shift. But it's funny that your encounters with, charismatic churches, as they're called, it is kind of so shocking. There's a great documentary called Marjo. I just looked at it.
I've seen that one.
Marjo, I think Marjo really tripped me out, because you see people like, I'm just going to say it, like Joel Osteen, okay? You see the big televangelist folks, and you wonder, like, what do they do when they're not on camera? Like, how do they live their lives? Marjo is that. Marjo was this guy who was actively doing the grift. Like, you see him doing the charismatic stuff, doing the speaking in tongues in front of a crowd, and literally 5 minutes later in the documentary, he's like counting his money in the back, like on the bed. It's such a cynic when people talk, they have these cynical takes about evangelicalism. Like, that's the proof of it right there. Like, it really is that bad for a lot of these people. It really is. I live
in the Metroplex. Those guys are a dime a dozen up here.
Yeah.
I wanted to say part of that experience is partly what drove me. I went to a Disciples of Christ college, university, Texas Christian University.
Oh, TCU. You went to TCU. Okay. All right. I know some folks from TCU.
And I had the best religion professor ever.
Okay.
And that's at that point, that's pretty much what concretized my atheism.
The religion class.
Thank you, Doctor.
Interesting.
Well, the whole course of study. The class that meant the most was cults and sects, SECTS, cults and sects,
sure,
and church-state relationship. And this guy was an authority on church-state relationship. So yeah, and then I had a brief dabbling with New Agey stuff, and then I finally became a critical thinker. So
well, good
anyway,
for you.
I just wanted to share the story that, well, yeah, you know.
Thanks for sharing that story, Phil. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that. Thank
Great show.
Oh, thanks so much for calling in. Definitely a fun little anecdote. MD, I was talking for most of that. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, I think it's very interesting. And again, I'm like reflecting back because in my undergrad days, there was like a very strong evangelical campus church.
Yeah.
And I got the same sense of that insidious creep, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would, whether like planned or not, they would sort of seek out positions of power. You know, their reps would be running for like the president of the student association or whatever, and they had a large voting body, right, that they could unify to push a candidate. They were very good at organizing and all these things. So I find it interesting that was observed, and I wonder how much of it's planned and how much of it is, you know, just people following their you know, the rules or whatever they think they ought to do because of their faith.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, speaking as somebody who was part of an evangelical Christian group in college, a big part of that was the social stuff, right?
Sure.
Like, I grew up in a Christian household. I grew up in a Christian culture. It made sense to go to a group that aligned with my sense of values and what I thought was true at the time, right? And so, like, that's a gateway to other stuff. And I definitely see people go down, you know, that path where they can get even more hardcore into it. I was specifically part of Campus Crusade. It's now called Crew. And Crew really does emphasize going on missions. And you'll see kids who don't have a lot of money, who are at school because they worked hard and they got scholarships, but who are spending thousands of dollars of money that either they raised or they're finding funding for, to go to Russia, to go to all these places, to go to, I mean, places where people don't need that, you know, and that money could be spent in other places. And that's pretty radical. Like, that's a radical thing to do, to go to another country to spread your ideology. But like, we just treat it as so normal. Like, missions is just such a normal thing. It's so
true.
Interesting.
If you take it out of the context of like even Christianity, it becomes odd, right? Can you imagine like a Muslim missionary coming to like Texas to spread their ideology? They'd be labeled as something else.
Yeah. Imagine a Muslim, you know, like a missionary going to Baylor University to try to spread Islam. Like, that's not going to fly. We're not going to accept that here. But for some reason, people think they have the liberty to go to another place and tell them.
Colonial mindset.
It really is, dude. It's a colonizer mindset. It really is. Yeah. Good way to put it. We got some other calls I want to try to get to, again, everybody, before we go. So please try to stay on the line. Next, we're going to talk to Raymond, who's calling in from Florida. Raymond, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Okay, well, I guess I was going to go in a different direction, but I'm not sure whether I should follow you guys on. But
well, you should definitely tell us.
Stick with your guns.
Yeah, stick, and whatever you talk with the call screen.
Okay,
too.
stay there.
Okay,
good.
Yeah.
Okay, good enough then. I would like to. I think there's a problem intellectually in the whole approach I'm hearing, not just from you, but many of these shows, you know, different. And what it is the missing of ontology. Okay? In other words, now what happens is that people are conceiving of religion, or specifically conceiving of God, which is not necessarily religion, is as an entity that is like any other entity. You know, it is part of nature. Okay? So is there any object like in front of you, like a coffee cup?
Yes.
Yeah. I got a cup.
Can you describe it a little? What's it look like?
I got a big orange cup right in front of me.
Okay, great. Good. It's round? Cylindrical?
It's cylindrical. Yes.
Okay.
It's got a topology to it.
Okay. Well, now you're describing its nature.
Yes.
True.
Yes.
Okay.
So let me ask you
Well,
this.
what I would like you to do now.
Do you think God's nature has never been described? Or do you think it's indescribable?
No, I think this has been described since the time of Aristotle.
So
okay,
God can be
finish
described.
one step here.
All right, I'll let you do your thing, and then we'll have a conversation.
Okay. What I would like you to do is take that same object that you're looking at and turn your attention away from what it is. And I want you to turn your attention to the fact that it is. Okay? So now you're no longer considering the nature of the object.
I'll be honest, I don't know what the difference is. What do you?
Yeah, so I think what Dan was doing was Dan was describing the qualities of the object,
the nature,
right?
Right.
Well, I don't know. The way you're using nature is a little bit wiggly to me. He's describing like qualities of the object, and there has to be an object present to have qualities. So what you're trying, at least I think what you're trying to say, is you're trying to get Dan to describe or turn his attention to the thing without referring to its qualities. But I think that everything that exists has a quality, right?
Everything that exists has a quality.
Of some kind.
Everything that exists, yes. But you have to be, it's much more complicated than you're making it. The ontology is a difficult subject, okay? But to just enter it a little, what I was trying to do was to turn his attention from the questions about what it is to the question of the fact that it is. That's a change in subject that a human being can do with any object. You can look at it and describe what it is, and then you can decide to cease describing what it is, and instead consider the fact that it is.
Okay, so how would you do that with the example of Dan's mug or coffee cup?
Okay,
what is it that he's considering?
Well, what it is a cup. But he's no longer considering what the cup is. Let's take another object, okay, a chair. Okay? You got a chair there.
I'm sorry, I really can't follow. What do you mean I'm not considering what the cup is? I can't make
Raymond.
I did not say you're not.
Let me see if I can summarize what you mean. You're trying to say that the existence of a thing is can be distinguished or can be distinct from its qualities, and so you can
nature. Yes.
Okay.
Sure. It's nature. So you're saying that there can be a thing that exists that doesn't have a nature necessarily. No,
I didn't say that at all. I did not say that.
No. I'm trying to understand. So correct me then. Where are you going with this? How does this get us to the ultimate point?
Okay. Well, when you make the transition from considering nature to considering what something is to considering the fact that it is, then you are no longer describing the nature of the thing. And now this is really important capability that human beings have. And the word ontology comes from the word being, the study of being as being. Okay.
Raymond, I'll be honest with you. We got just a couple minutes left of the show, and we got at least a couple of the calls on the line.
Gotcha.
So
I'll go very quick then. Okay. Yeah. There's a whole, the evolution produced a brain that's capable of projecting causal chains. Okay. By considering what is the nature of causality, natural causality, which is basically temporal symmetry modeled as, cause and effect. Okay. And that allows us to manipulate the world. But it also needed to give us desire, okay, the desire to survive. It turns out that the nature of being can result in a type of experiencing that is ecstatic, okay, that it floods your brain somehow with these incredible chemicals, and that this drives a lot of religion. And it's the metaphysical side of religion, the ecstatic side and the mystical side. And these experiences that people have are very real. It also drives reproductive instincts, okay? And this gives us, that's why we celebrate births, because of being.
Fast forward for me, Raymond.
Of being.
Yeah. So this is
God,
this is like
you can't.
If I can interrupt here, Raymond, this is like Richard Rohr level. I'm familiar, with the right. Like this is like Christian mystic tradition of thinking about the nature of being, ontology. Like I can see where you're coming from with this, but like I think by going down this thought hole, you're kind of like adding extra conclusions or assumptions to things that you don't really have to. I think that's the big problem with metaphysics to me, is that the ontology is just you can come up with a lot of different formations of this, and you can't necessarily prove or disprove without some sort of verification principle to really distinguish what's going on. Like talking about the ecstatic experiences. Okay. I don't have to have any. No, Raymond, I'm not going to let you talk. I'm going to talk. Okay. So when we're talking about like ecstatic experiences, I don't have to have any metaphysical explanation for that. I really don't. I really just do that through the physical. There's no real reason for me to explain through a metaphysical ontology why this thing is happening. Like I understand, like we as humans want to know why there's a thing, but like it's not really necessary for a description of the world. I don't know that.
Okay.
It's really, it really has to be there.
It's necessary for a description of worlding. Evidencing itself is being. Okay, and so that's what being means, essentially. So if you have evidence of any kind, then you have being, and you will never understand what you're saying, really, if you refuse to consider these issues. I'll just put it that way. They lead to a much, much deeper and better understanding, and then you'll give up asking for evidence for God, because it's crazy. Any evidencing.
Oh, hang on. You just said evidencing
itself.
What'd you say?
Man,
evidencing is being. Evidencing
Raymond,
is the same as being?
I regret not taking you earlier in this show, because we need to elaborate more.
Raymond, can you do us a favor?
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And call back next week, maybe.
Oh,
did we drop it? He
Yeah.
left. Okay. Well, if you're still listening, Raymond, I think you should just abbreviate, summarize, and call back next week, and we'll take you earlier, and whoever's hosting will take you earlier, and we'll get a good discussion going. Because I'm interested. I want to hear
I'm interested too, Raymond. I don't want you to think that we are ignoring you or that we're not interested in what you have to say. We really do. We're honestly just getting to the end of the show, and this is the kind of a conversation that we should have had earlier. But and usually I'd ask you more questions. I'm kind of just giving my point of view on this more so, and I won't do so much now that we're kind of in this conversation, because that's not fair to you. But metaphysics in general, right? The reason why I reject metaphysical theories of the world, metaphysical understanding, is again this kind of goes back to this Occam's razor of I don't need any of this extra stuff in my explanations of the world. I really don't. Now, there's nothing that doesn't preclude that says that those explanations couldn't be there per se, but rather there's no real reason for me to get there in the first place. It's interesting because we have to view everything through a conscious experience, right? I don't believe in scientism. Ultimately, we have to go through some sort of subjective, conscious thing, a mediator. Yeah. But there are some rules we can look at. There are some principles that we can use to kind of evaluate that. And metaphysics in my understanding, isn't a required discipline to look at that. But anyway, it's a very complicated and complex thing. I want to try to get to one more call. I think we have time for one more, maybe. I think it's going to be a quick question. Maurice is calling from Alabama. Maurice, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, Dan. I got a quick story to tell you. I got the Moderna COVID vaccines in February and March of 2021. 4 months later, I donated blood to the American Red Cross. 2 weeks afterwards, I got a letter from Red Cross saying my blood had tested was reactive for HIV. There's no way that I could have contracted HIV. And my question was, is it possible that that something else could cause me to get a reactive test? Now, when they get the reactive test, they test the blood again. And the second time they tested it, it did not test reactive. So they concluded that I was not HIV active, but now I'm tainted, and I'm not qualified to be a donor anymore, which is a loss to Red Cross. It's not a big loss to me, but I just wondered if you thought it's possible that something else, antibiotics or a vaccine or something like that, could cause that reactive test.
I don't think it can. It's interesting. The thing you have to remember is that with every test, every diagnostic test, this would be like a diagnostic test that they're doing on your blood sample. They all have a false positive and a false negative rate that's known, right? So they know that, say 1% of their tests that come back positive are going to be falsely positive. It's just, if you look at the mechanics of the test, again, we want it to be a binary yes or no, but it's never a binary yes or no, right? It's like if the level of a particular, protein or genetic sequence rises above a certain threshold, then we call it positive. But that threshold is set, it's titrated to the sensitivity of the test, like basically how accurate we want the test to be. So I think you shouldn't be. I mean, it sucks for you, and I think that if I were you, my first instinct would be to blame the test, not believe the test, and go to an outside lab and get your blood tested again, right? And if the second test comes up positive, then you've got more reason to think that there might be something true to it, right? So like when I'm treating patients, if I get a test result that seems unusual or inconsistent with what I expected, my first instinct is to retest it, because I know that false positives, false negatives, and like laboratory errors happen. And so that would be the first thing I would do if I were you. I would not try to pin it on the vaccine or on like your reaction to the vaccine or anything like that. I don't think those two are related. And I think that's just the tendency that we all have to correlate, two things happening in close proximity, close temporal proximity to each other as being related causally, but I don't think they are.
Yeah. Rates for false positives are really, really an interesting phenomenon to study. Is you can, from humans are not very good at probability naturally. And so false positives tend to happen more often than what we would think. Right. Yeah. So the example, man, really don't have time to get into the math of it. But if you have like a population that's like, 80, this test shows that 80% of the time it's going to be it's going to be right if it's accurate for positive. But then 15% it's going to show for negative population. Like Bayesian reasoning is actually going to show that false positives are going to happen more often than you think with a lot of these tests, given a larger sample size of the population and how these tests work. So all that to say, this is really hard when we're talking about COVID stuff in particular, just going back to that and vaccines, because when they're doing these tests, people think, oh, well, I got this negative and I'm still sick. That must mean I must be fine. But that's definitely not necessarily true. You can definitely take another test and still have it. And so it's not an absolute surefire way, especially with the rapid testing that is known for having a higher rate of false positives. False negatives. False negatives. Excuse me.
Yeah. And that's you know, there's a false negative rate associated with just the test, but then there's also the sampling error, right? Like it depends on how well, how deeply, and how vigorously you do your sampling. If it's a self-test, right?
Yeah. So one of those things where, again, good to ask doctors about what these results mean and how to interpret stuff. But hopefully we got you some advice there, Maurice, or at least MD Aware did. I just come in at the end, contributing little to the conversation, but enough to where there's something. So we are getting to the end of this show today, but we have a very special announcement that we want to give, and we are going to give it to you in just a second. Before we do, we need to tell you where we can actually find MD Aware. MD Aware, where can you be found at?
Okay, so I have a Twitter account. You can tweet at me. It's EMDEEAWARE. So I couldn't get the actual letters MD Aware, but I got the phonetic MD Aware.
And it's a new Twitter. It's a new Twitter. Yeah, brand new Twitter. So you guys should check that out. And we are going to be on the Discord after show in just a second. We are going to go on the fan run server, ACA fan run Discord, ACD Discord is what it's called there. A link to that's going to be in the description. You also see it on screen there. So check it out. If you do have some more questions, if you weren't able to talk to us today, come talk to us. But hey, this is Truth Wanted. This is a live show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. So if you're listening at home to a recording, come check out the live show and come call in, especially. We'd love to talk to you. And the chat's always active, always has funny stuff to say, always have funny jokes to make about me. And sometimes the guests, but mostly me. There is a lot of different ways you can support the show. One of them is through Patreon. We have patreon.com/truthwanted there. If you want to donate, we give a shout out to all of our patrons for that Patreon. So thank you to everybody that does that. Another way to support the show is through merch. We got merch in the store. You should check that out. It's hoodie season, baby. I'm going to say it every time because it is. So get those hoodies. Get those masks. We literally just talked about the efficacy of those. So you should definitely be getting some of those if you don't have them already. And if you want to become a YouTube member, that's another way to support the show. You can do that. You get little chat slowdown functions as well. And you get to get little cool emoticons of my face if you want to use that. So thank you to everybody who wants to join the channel as a member. If you're watching this on YouTube, this show is also found on Spotify and iTunes, wherever else you get your podcasts. And hey, please leave us a review, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We love engagement for you guys. And check out the Facebook fan group as well if you haven't already. That fan group is another way to check out with folks for Truth Wanted. A link to that's also in the description. Email truth@atheist-community.org. Twitter @ObjectivelyDan. Follow me on there. It's pretty cool. And of course, I have to thank the lovely, fantastic, spectacular, amazing crew that helps make this show happen every single week. Look at that crew. Woo! Beautiful, beautiful group of people. And they really do make this show happen. A lot of stuff happens behind the scenes that I wish you guys knew about. It's pretty fun. But now it's time for the announcement. Okay, so starting next week, MD Aware is going to be an official host of the Truth Wanted show. So congratulations, MD Aware, for becoming another spectacular host on this little program. You will be hosting next week with another special guest, and I'm looking forward to watching that.
Yeah, I have big shoes to fill, or I got a big reputation to live up to. But I think it'll be good. And so if anyone's out there watching and you heard something that you didn't like and you want to talk about it next week, call in.
Yes.
I'm very happy to hear from you.
Call in. If you got beef with MD Aware already, he wants to hear about it. He signed up for this. Okay. He's doing this out of his own volition. Don't ask me how or why, but he's doing it. So thanks, MD Aware. Really happy to see what you do on the show. And before we close out and go to the Discord, any words of wisdom you want to share?
Oh, words of wisdom. Well, okay. It's difficult. Everyone's having a difficult time. Just remember that the obstacle is the path.
Whoa, the obstacle is that like a Buddhist cone that you just
feels like it, right?
What
I can't remember where I picked it up, but this is what I've been telling myself. Every time I hit a roadblock, the obstacle is the path.
The obstacle is the path. That's like, I feel like Maya Angelou said that or something. That's crazy.
I'll have to look it up.
That. The obstacle is the path. All right. Well, folks, remember the obstacle is the path. And remember to always keep wanting the truth. And I'll see you next time.
Watch the nonprofits and join the hosts in the live chat. Sundays at 3 p.m. Central between the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.